Welcome to Horror Needs a Hero, JULYNTIES Slashers. What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Horror Needs a Hero. I love doing these. If you remember, we did 4 episodes in May for Mateys, where we talked about the 80s. Well, for this month, we're doing JULYNTIES. And there's already been 2 episodes released, one by Emily's Adventures in Horrorland and Cody Leach. There will be a playlist link posted below, so you can go down there, you can click that, and you can see the rest of the episodes. And we'll also put a link to all of the Mateys episodes below, so you can see what it's all about. But for this particular episode, Slashers, CP and I, we're going to be talking about slashers of the 90s. I'm going to be discussing everything up to Scream, and CP is going to be talking about everything from Scream to the year 2000. And there's a couple reasons why we did that. The obvious one is because it splits it right down the middle, but the other one is, if you look at both halves of that decade, Scream and after is like a completely different era. This is where slashers became valid again. You know, Scream ushered in a boom, just like Halloween did in 1978. But before that, it was pretty much slim pickings. There were some slashers out there, and we'll start out with what I like to call the death of the icons. Freddy, Michael, and Jason were pretty much sucking on fumes, really. First off, Freddy ushered in Freddy's Dead in the year 1990. And Freddy's Dead is arguably the worst movie in the whole series. Why they would call a movie Freddy's Dead and put zero effort into it whatsoever is beyond me. But the movie was so bad that they had to go back to the well, to Wes Craven himself, and come up with a completely new idea to revive the franchise. It wasn't safe anymore. If it was safe, then they could have continued on the path that they were going. But because it wasn't safe, they had to come up with a completely different plot and make Freddy completely different, even visually. New Nightmare was actually a good film, but Freddy's Dead left such a bad taste in everybody's mouth that nobody really cared, and the movie was sort of a box office flop. Now, Jason actually had some legal trouble there, because the first 8 movies, they were successful, but with each entry, they waned in quality. By the time you got to part 8, it was just really a complete shitfest. Even if you like that movie, you gotta admit, it's not a good movie at all. So Paramount sold the rights to New Line, and New Line could not use the name Friday the 13th anymore. Why does that sound familiar? So New Line makes a huge bonehead move with the first movie out the gate, called Jason Goes to Hell. We just got the rights to this franchise. Why not go ahead and completely screw it up and keep the main character out of the movie for 90% of the time? The timing was completely off on this one. When you're in your studio getting such a successful property like Friday the 13th, that first movie, you want to hit it out of the park. And the only saving grace for that movie was the very end, when we see Freddy's glove come up and grab Jason's mask and pull it down in the dirt. That's the only thing that people got excited about. The rest of the movie, nobody really gave 2 shits because it wasn't Jason. And they brought in characters that were a little bit too different for the rest of the franchise, like Creighton Duke, who is a decent character, but he doesn't really fit in those first 8 movies. Then they get the idea, let's put Jason in space. And it's interesting because that actually came out as a joke just around a meeting table. And they ran with it. They actually did it. Let's go ahead and put him in space. Can't be any worse than the previous entry. It almost was. I'm a fan of Jason X, but again, I can admit it's not a good movie. I think that's part of its charm, is it's so bad. It's the only movie in the franchise that is firmly planted in B-movie territory. It almost feels like a TV movie. Putting a horror icon in space before this was considered a joke. Literally, people would joke about, you know, this is when your franchise jumps the shark, and Jason did it. Which brings me to the third icon of the big 3, my boy, Michael Myers. 1989's Halloween 5 was arguably one of the worst Halloween movies of the bunch. Halloween 4 is one of the best movies of the bunch, and they didn't take the time to nurture that story and continue it in a great fashion with part 5. They rushed the whole thing, and in the end, you got a really bad movie with some of the most annoying characters ever. I'm looking at the cops and I'm looking at Tina. What the hell? And then in 1995, we had Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. Very controversial movie of the bunch. I love this movie because of how dark and heavy it is. But the story, I am not gonna lie, is kind of batshit crazy. all over the place. This is the first movie that really plants both feet firmly in that Thorn storyline. Halloween 5 hinted at it, but this one embraced it, and a lot of people did not like that. And really, this is the movie that almost sent the franchise direct to video. So as you can see, we're already off to a pretty shaky start with slashers in the 90s. Now, it isn't all bad. There are some slashers worth mentioning. I'm not going to mention all of them, but I will mention a couple. And I just finished reviewing this franchise, the Child's Play franchise. Child's Play 2 is my favorite of the bunch. It really nails what the character Chucky is all about. And this one was a great movie to start off the 90s with a bang. And I think one reason that movie worked so well is because you had some main characters returning, like Andy, and also like Brad Dourif. Brad Dourif embraces this franchise and he's in every film. If he wasn't, then it would die a horrible death. But also you have some awesome side characters, like Kyle, played by Christina Elise, who is one of my favorite Final Girls, actually. And really that movie, it just has such an energy about it. It hits all the right marks that a horror sequel should hit. Unfortunately, Child's Play 3 is quite the kick in the nuts quality-wise. It's not all bad, but it puts Chucky in a military school environment, which arguably is not that interesting for a horror film. And Andy Barclay did not return for this one, so he was sorely missed. The next film I'm going to talk about is Candyman, starring Tony Todd, and this was an attempt at creating a horror icon based on an urban legend. Everybody knows the legend of saying a certain evil name into a mirror 3 times and then it appears. And that's what Candyman was. You say Candyman's name in the mirror 3 times, he appears, and he wreaks havoc. Tony Todd did such a great job with being completely evil in this movie and putting the audience on edge. Also, Virginia Madsen was great in this role. She did a great job at emoting that vulnerable side that we often like to see in a final girl. But really the mid-90s, it was grasping at straws. Studios didn't really know what to do with slashers or the horror genre in general. The big 3 horror icons were all but dead at the time, and something needed to happen. Something big needed to bring horror back in a big way. And thankfully, Drew Barrymore understood this all too well. So anyway, guys, that's our slashers edition of Horror Needs a Hero, JULYNTIES. Let us know down in the comments what are some of your favorite 90s slashers. And as always, guys, thanks so much for watching, and stay horror.